We often speak about true love, but in reality, most romantic relationships on this planet are anything but true love. In fact, they're quite transactional. They usually start with a couple coming together, and there's sort of an unspoken agreement between them that they're going to provide for each other's needs. In the case of the woman, that can often be the need for protection, for security, for provision, because she feels more vulnerable in this world, especially if she's going to have children. For a man, that's often his physical needs, but even more than that, his emotional needs. Men have difficulty with expressing themselves emotionally, with being vulnerable. It's just not something that's allowed in the man's world, and their connection to the feminine is very important for their emotional well-being. So there's a sort of dynamic in relationships where these two people are basically coming together in a sort of transactional sense to say, okay, I'm going to be what you need, I'm going to fulfill all your needs, and there's this expectation that you're going to fulfill all of my needs. And that sort of creates this constant tension that on the one hand sparks the romance, but on the other hand causes difficulty when one person doesn't feel their needs are being met, or both. Then there's sort of a tension between the two that can often sort of erupt in arguments and fighting and so forth. So this tension that exists is very much the old way of love. It's not the sort of love that we're heading toward in the future. One of the reasons being that it's really constricting. It is what's caused us to develop sort of traditional roles in relationships. You know, the man is the breadwinner and the provider, the woman is the homemaker and the mother. But that's not necessarily fulfilling for either partner, especially for women who often want more than just being a homemaker. And in today's society, being a homemaker and a mother is also very isolating because we don't have close communities where women can support each other easily with the day-to-day of life. So it creates a situation that's just very unsatisfying for both people, and that's why we've seen a move away lately from traditional roles toward more non-traditional roles. We've seen more flexibility in terms of women having a family and having a career and so on and so forth. But that's also caused a byproduct in that we end up with relationships where nobody's needs are getting met because everybody's so busy living their lives and doing their things, trying to make ends meet and so forth, that there's just no way that they can really have that sort of connection with each other. It's difficult to maintain. So I think that we're moving to a new state of love that's going to be completely different. But to do that, we have to change how we view romance and how we look for romance and what we think romance is, or that sort of romantic love. So when love comes from the place of pure unconditional giving toward the other, there are no insecurities that are attached to it. Challenge is that to really love unconditionally, you have to be complete and whole within yourself. You have to be somebody who is just as comfortable without that person being there as you are with that person being there. It doesn't mean that that person doesn't enrich your life, doesn't fulfill you, that you don't enjoy having them around or anything like that. What it means is that you need to find that wholeness inside of you first before you can really bring your full self to that partner. And then when you do that, you can approach that person without expectations. You can see them in the beauty of who they really are. That's the problem with transactional love. We can't really see everyone as who they really are. We have to see them as the projection of who we need them to be, because if they don't fulfill our expectations about who we need them to be, then that makes us feel insecure. And that really is the source of most arguing and fighting in relationships, is people's expectations are being let down about who I need this person to be so that I can be who I need to be. When we move forward into the new dynamic, what's going to happen is that we are going to learn to find that wholeness more deeply within ourselves. We're going to be able to find partners that don't complete us, but that complement us. And that we'll find that we're going to be able to appreciate and enjoy them for who they are, because their problems, their challenges, their insecurities, and so on and so forth aren't a threat to our happiness. Our happiness, my happiness, is not dependent on whether or not this person is being everything I need them to be, I find my happiness inside. And you have two people that are happy as individuals who are even more happy as a couple. They bring more fulfillment to one another because they're both bringing their happiness to the table. The happiness is the commonality rather than the fear and the insecurity. So there's going to be a shift, but in the meantime, I think we're going to also see a divide. We're already seeing that right now with the trad wife movement. We're seeing a lot of women that are reverting back to more traditional mode of living and viewing themselves and their identity. We're also seeing the rise of men who are shifting more to the ultra masculine and trying to reclaim this sort of more traditional masculine role. And we forgot that with that is going to come the cost again of very restrictive roles of people having to play a role rather than being who they naturally are in the relationship. It's not really an answer. What it is it's a reaction. It's a reaction to the fact that relationships aren't working in the modern world as well as they could. Not all, but the majority of them. And there's a sort of hope that if I can return and embrace this more traditional value, this more traditional way of life, that we'll find what worked in the past. We forget the fact that it never really fully worked in the past. It was always a sort of an ideal that was problematic. It was problematic because it wasn't love in its fullest expression. So if you're looking for that type of love relationship, start with that inner journey and start with finding yourself in wholeness and being at peace with yourself. Then begin looking for or opening to somebody who complements you. And you're going to resonate with that person on a very different level than you would in a typical romance. A typical romance is much more intense because it's need-based. Somebody who complements you is more harmonious. It doesn't have the same intensity as a traditional romance type relationship. That doesn't mean it doesn't have depth. In fact, it can have tremendously more depth because you are able to really invest yourself and connect much more deeply with someone when you're able to see them for who they are. But you'll be able to find somebody that you really harmonate with, somebody that you really connect with at the very deepest level, and somebody who you're safe to open up to and safe to be yourself around. And that in itself is incredibly special and wonderful. Wishing you all abundant joy and love.